All right, Trevor, thank you. The CBC's Trevor Dunn in Toronto. Let's talk about what can be done about a situation like this and the gun violence in Toronto and other cities as well. We're joined by Wendy Cukier in Ottawa. Wendy is the co-founder and president of the Coalition for Gun Control. We also have Louis March in Toronto, and Louis is the founder of Zero Gun Violence Movement. All right, Louis, let me begin with you. As gun control advocate, how do you see the shooting of two little girls on a playground in broad daylight?
The shooting itself doesn't surprise us. The conditions have changed dramatically in terms of the factors, the characteristics of gun violence in the city of Toronto. The access to guns, the caliber of guns, the brazen nature of the shootings, the young people handling the guns, all fueled by social media streams, right? Things have changed dramatically from the year of the gun in 2005 when we had 52 homicides. And
yes, and I think it's 181 shootings, 18 homicides so far, shooting deaths so far this year in Toronto, 181 shootings.
Exactly. Yeah. So we've seen a 100% increase in the last 3 years in gun violence incidents, homicides, and so on. Right.
Right.
The writing has been on the wall. We've challenged the political leadership to be courageous and show some leadership and some will here to look at what has changed. The characteristics 10 years ago are not the same today. The reports, the analysis from 10 years ago are not relevant today. We've never seen the brazenness of the shootings. We've never seen the young people. We've never seen the caliber of guns being used, right? The age of the people involved in the violence. We have never seen this before, right? And I think it's about time that the political will, the political courage and political leadership be on display to address this problem. If not, we're going to see this increase on an ongoing basis. And this is what Zero Gun Violence Movement is about. We do not want to see, we want to interrupt. Our focus is on early intervention. How do we get into these communities?
Right.
We know the communities. We know the circumstances, right? We know the characteristics. Why are the political leaders turning a blind eye? They think this is a hot potato. They don't want to deal with the real causes of it. And then when this happens, I see everybody running around like chickens without heads, saying how concerned they are. But when they had an opportunity to invest in these communities in a meaningful way before it happened, they were never to be found.
Okay, I'm going to pick up on that moment in just a second. Wendy, I want to bring you into the conversation. What goes through your mind when you see two young children killed in broad daylight by gun violence?
Well, first and foremost, I'm a mother, so it's horrifying and it's shocking. And just to reinforce what Louis says, we know that investing upstream is much more effective than trying to intervene after the fact. Of course, the police need resources to bring the perpetrators to justice. Of course, we need services for the victims, and as Louis said, we need to invest in these communities. But sadly, these trends, and we've seen a dramatic increase in gun violence across the country over the last few years, these trends were entirely predictable and preventable because the evidence is very clear. As you relax controls over firearms, you make guns more available to be misused and diverted to illegal markets. For the first time in almost 30 years, that's how long I've been working on this issue, for the first time in 30 years, Toronto police say the majority of crime guns that they have traced originated in Canada. They were not smuggled in from the United States. What that signals is that the relaxation of gun control that we saw over the last few years has had a profound impact. And we've been trying as hard as we can to get the federal government to take leadership in filling the loopholes.
What loophole do you think should be filled?
Well, there were a number of provisions. We no longer have the controls over the sales of firearms in Canada that we had in 1977. The U.S. currently has better controls over the sales of rifles and shotguns. The Conservatives relaxed the controls on handguns. They went from a situation where you could only take handguns between prescribed locations to allowing handgun owners to take them anywhere in the province. We now have over 1 million handguns and assault weapons legally owned. That's twice as many as we had 10 years ago. all illegal guns begin as legal guns, and as you increase the availability of firearms, particularly handguns and assault weapons, you create enormous opportunities for those to enter illegal markets.
Okay. Louis, do you think, well, let me inject this into the situation. So we're hearing today that Mayor Tory is saying 200 more police officers going onto the streets this year in Toronto. Is that an answer? Is that part of the answer here?
Look, John Tory is a politician. You can almost predict what he's going to say. When these type of shootings take place, he's the first one to say how safe the city of Toronto is. But there's a difference between living in Rosedale and Rexdale in the city of Toronto. He's the mayor of a divided city. He must acknowledge that, right? Throwing more police at the issue, at the problem, you can't police yourself out of this problem. The socioeconomic conditions that create demands for guns and demand for violence. Like, let's talk economics. The supply of guns has increased. The availability of guns have increased. Kids are saying that it's easier for them to get guns than it is to get jobs, right? Something's wrong there. Why are kids demanding guns? Socioeconomic conditions, poverty.
Yeah, but draw the link for me between being poor and having a gun.
When you live in conditions where violence is normalized in your community, when that's all you see as a way out in terms of opportunity, if there's no jobs, if you don't have the proper education, if you don't have the proper supports, people are going to go to what's closest to them. And if drug dealing, bullying, gun violence, gangs are close to them, that's what they're going to gravitate towards, right? So over policing these communities, like it's not rocket science. It's more than over policing the community. Deal with the problems. Supply of guns, deal with it. Demand for guns, deal with it. And this is what people are not doing. All they're doing is blaming each other and blaming and shaming communities because they're not cooperating with police. There's a reason why that happens. So over-policing these communities has proven that it doesn't work. So something has to change. We have to see a different courage, a different type of leadership, and a different type of will besides just throwing police. Look, throwing police at the problem might sound good in terms of being tough on crime. Let's find the perpetrators, let's lock them up, let's throw away the keys, right? You know, is that really going to solve the problem when the conditions exist? These kids are going to come back out of jail at some time sooner or later. Are they going to go back to the same conditions where the top 15 employers in the city of Toronto will not hire anybody with a criminal record, right? These kids don't have a way out. So what do you think they're going to do? They're going to walk around with a big smile on their face? Hell no, they're not going to do that.
You know, a few years ago, I did a documentary in Glasgow, which is some of the highest rates of violence outside in the city centre, and knives were the weapons of choice in this particular area. And there was a police captain there who actually, the police inspector at the time said, look, he said the same thing that you're saying, that if you put a template of poverty, lack of education, high depression rates, high drinking rates, low education, etc., over where the violence is, it's almost a perfect match. And that violence spreads like a disease.
Yep. If you look at the public health approach, Louis is exactly right. And dealing with prevention of disease is much more effective than dealing with it after the fact. It's interesting you mentioned the UK. The entire United Kingdom, which has more than twice as many people as Canada, had the same number of gun murders last year that we're already tracking to in the city of Toronto. The availability of firearms also has a profound impact on the lethality of violence and the overall murder rates. So I agree with Louis that you have to invest in addressing disparity. It's not sheer poverty, it's the gap between the rich and the poor. And if you look at the study that the United Way did recently, it shows very clearly, the data backs up what Louis is saying. The situation is getting worse in terms of rich getting richer, poor getting poorer. And that maps very closely to the neighborhoods where virtually every kid in a classroom knows somebody who has been shot.
Yeah. Well, I hope this doesn't become the new normal. We'll continue to watch this trend, and it's sad that you say it's predictable. But Wendy Cukier, Louis March, thank you so much for joining us with your ideas on this situation tonight. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having
the
me.
opportunity.
Okay, you're welcome.